Here's a question that will reveal something profound about human psychology. What do you fear more, physical death or social rejection? If you're like most people, you probably think death is obviously worse. But Dr. Naomi Eisenberger's research at UCLA shows that your brain literally can't tell the difference. When you experience social rejection, the same neural pathways activate as when you experience physical pain. Your anterior cingulate cortex and right ventral prefrontal cortex light up exactly as they would if someone was stabbing you with a knife. To your brain, being rejected by others is equivalent to being physically attacked. This isn't metaphorical, it's neurological reality. Dr. Jeff McDonald's research shows that people would rather endure electric shocks than experience social rejection. In laboratory studies, participants consistently choose physical pain over the psychological pain of being excluded or rejected by others. But here's what's even more disturbing. This fear of rejection is controlling every aspect of your life in ways you don't even realize. It's preventing you from pursuing your dreams, expressing your authentic self, building meaningful relationships, and achieving your full potential. You're living a smaller, safer, more constrained life because your brain is constantly scanning for threats to your social acceptance. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research shows that the fear of rejection is so powerful that it overrides our rational decision-making processes. You'll choose options that keep you safe from rejection, even when those options are objectively worse for your long-term happiness and success. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your brain treats rejection like a life or death threat, how this fear is systematically sabotaging your life, and most importantly, how to rewire your neural pathways to become genuinely immune to rejection within the next 25 minutes. But first, let me ask you something that might change everything. What would you do if you knew with absolute certainty that no one could reject you? Before we dive into the solution, I need you to understand the true cost of living in fear of rejection. This isn't just about feeling uncomfortable in social situations. Rejection sensitivity is systematically destroying your potential and keeping you trapped in a life that's far smaller than what you're capable of. Dr. Geraldine Downey's research at Columbia University found that people with high rejection sensitivity earn 23% less income over their lifetimes, have 40% fewer meaningful relationships, and are 60% more likely to experience depression and anxiety disorders. The fear of rejection literally costs you money, love, and mental health. But the damage goes deeper than statistics can capture. Consider what you've already lost to rejection fear, the job opportunities you didn't pursue because you were afraid of being turned down, the relationships you never started because you couldn't risk being rejected, the creative projects you abandoned because you feared criticism, the authentic parts of yourself you've hidden to avoid disapproval. Dr. Brené Brown's research shows that rejection sensitivity creates what she calls armor, psychological defenses that protect you from rejection, but also prevent you from experiencing connection, creativity, and joy. You become so focused on avoiding rejection that you stop taking the risks necessary for a fulfilling life. The irony is that trying to avoid rejection actually increases your chances of being rejected. When you're constantly worried about others' approval, you become less authentic, less confident, and less attractive to the very people whose acceptance you're seeking. Meanwhile, people who are genuinely immune to rejection, who can handle no without it affecting their self-worth, are paradoxically more likely to receive yes responses. They take more risks, express themselves more authentically, and pursue opportunities more aggressively because they're not paralyzed by the possibility of rejection. Dr. Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy shows that rejection sensitivity creates a vicious cycle. Fear of rejection leads to avoidance. Avoidance prevents you from developing confidence and skills. Lack of confidence increases your fear of rejection. You become trapped in a psychological prison of your own making. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every day you live in fear of rejection is another day you're not living your authentic life, pursuing your real goals, or building the relationships you actually want. To understand why rejection feels like death to your brain, you need to understand the evolutionary origins of this fear. For millions of years, social rejection literally was a death sentence, and your brain still operates as if this ancient reality is true today. The survival imperative. Dr. Roy Baumeister's research on the need to belong shows that humans evolved as intensely social creatures who depended on group membership for survival. In ancestral environments, being rejected by your tribe meant facing predators, starvation, and harsh weather alone, a virtual guarantee of death. Your ancestors, who were most sensitive to signs of potential rejection, were more likely to modify their behavior to maintain group acceptance, increasing their chances of survival and reproduction. Over thousands of generations, this created what Dr. Mark Leary calls sociometer theory. Your self-esteem functions as an internal gauge of your social acceptance. When your sociometer detects threats to your social standing, it triggers the same alarm systems that would activate if you were facing physical danger. This is why rejection doesn't just hurt emotionally, it hurts physically, activating pain pathways in your brain and releasing stress hormones throughout your body. The attachment system. Dr. John Bowlby's research on attachment theory reveals that rejection sensitivity begins in infancy through your early relationships with caregivers. Babies who experience inconsistent or rejecting care develop what he calls anxious attachment, a lifelong pattern of hypersensitivity to signs of rejection or abandonment. This attachment system becomes your template for all future relationships. If you learned early that love and acceptance were conditional or unpredictable, your brain develops hypervigilant scanning for rejection threats. You become like a smoke detector that's too sensitive, going off at the slightest hint of social danger. Dr. Philip Shaver's research shows that about 60% of adults have secure attachment styles and are naturally resilient to rejection, while 40% have insecure attachment styles that make them more vulnerable to rejection sensitivity. But here's the crucial insight. Attachment styles can be changed through conscious effort and new experiences, the social brain network. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research using brain imaging shows that humans have evolved a social brain network, neural circuits specifically dedicated to understanding and navigating social relationships. This network is so important that it's active even when you're not consciously thinking about social situations. The social brain network includes the medial prefrontal cortex for understanding others' thoughts and intentions, the temporal parietal junction for perspective taking, and the anterior cingulate cortex for detecting social pain. These regions are among the most metabolically expensive parts of your brain, indicating how crucial social cognition was for human survival. When this network detects potential rejection, it triggers what Dr. Shelley Taylor calls the tend and befriend response, an urgent drive to repair social bonds and restore acceptance. This response can override your rational thinking and cause you to act in ways that compromise your authentic self to regain social approval. The status hierarchy system. Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research on stress and hierarchy shows that humans, like other primates, are constantly monitoring their position in social hierarchies. Rejection often signals a drop in status, which triggers stress responses designed to motivate you to regain your position. This status monitoring happens automatically and unconsciously. Your brain is constantly asking, where do I stand relative to others? Am I being included or excluded? Am I moving up or down in the hierarchy? These assessments influence your mood, confidence, and behavior without your conscious awareness. The problem is that modern social environments are far more complex than the small, stable groups your brain evolved to navigate. You're now part of multiple, overlapping social networks with different rules and hierarchies, making it impossible to maintain high status in all of them simultaneously. The emotional contagion effect. Dr. Elaine Hatfield's research on emotional contagion shows that humans automatically mirror the emotions and behaviors of others as a way of building social bonds. This mirroring happens within milliseconds and occurs below the threshold of conscious awareness. When you fear rejection, you become hyper-attuned to others' emotional states and unconsciously adjust your behavior to match what you think they want. This emotional chameleon effect might help you avoid immediate rejection, but it prevents you from developing an authentic sense of self. The cognitive bias cascade. Dr. Aaron Beck's research on cognitive biases shows that rejection sensitivity creates a cascade of distorted thinking patterns that amplify your fear. You develop what he calls rejection schemas, mental frameworks that interpret ambiguous social situations as threatening. These schemas create confirmation bias. You notice and remember instances of rejection while ignoring or forgetting instances of acceptance. You also develop mind-reading tendencies, assuming you know what others are thinking about you, usually negative thoughts, without any real evidence. The modern mismatch. The crucial insight is that your brain's rejection detection system evolved for small, face-to-face groups where social feedback was immediate, clear, and consequential. In modern environments, you're exposed to thousands of potential rejection sources through social media, work environments, and complex social networks. Your ancient brain can't distinguish between being rejected by your survival-dependent tribe and being unfriended on social media. It treats all rejection as equally threatening, creating chronic stress and anxiety that's completely disproportionate to the actual consequences. Understanding this evolutionary mismatch is the first step toward freedom. Your fear of rejection made perfect sense for your ancestors, but it's now an outdated survival mechanism that's preventing you from thriving in the modern world. Now let me show you exactly what happens in your brain when you experience rejection, and more importantly, how understanding these neural mechanisms gives you the power to rewire your responses and become genuinely immune to rejection. The pain pathway activation. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger's groundbreaking research using fMRI brain scans shows that social rejection activates the anterior cingulate cortex and right ventral prefrontal cortex, the exact same regions that process physical pain. This isn't just a metaphor. Rejection literally hurts in the same way that physical injury hurts. When you're rejected, your brain releases the same stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and inflammatory chemicals, cytokines, that it would release if you were physically attacked. This explains why rejection can make you feel physically sick, exhausted, or in pain. But here's the crucial insight, doctor. C. Nathan DeWall's research shows that taking acetaminophen, Tylenol, actually reduces the emotional pain of rejection because it blocks the same pain pathways. This proves that rejection pain is neurologically real, not just psychological. The threat detection system. Dr. Joseph Ledoux's research on the amygdala shows that your brain has two pathways for processing potential threats: the low road, fast, automatic, emotional, and the high road, slow, deliberate, rational. When you fear rejection, your amygdala becomes hyperactive and defaults to the low road, triggering fight or flight responses before your rational mind can assess the actual threat level. This hyperactive threat detection creates what Dr. Daniel Siegel calls amygdala hijack. Your emotional brain takes control and makes decisions based on fear rather than logic. You might avoid important conversations, turn down opportunities, or compromise your values to prevent potential rejection. The amygdala also has what Dr. Rick Hansen calls a negativity bias. It's much more sensitive to potential threats than potential rewards. This means you'll notice and remember one instance of rejection much more vividly than 10 instances of acceptance. The stress response cascade. Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research shows that chronic rejection sensitivity creates persistent activation of your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, your body's main stress response system. This chronic stress has devastating effects on your physical and mental health. Elevated cortisol levels impair memory formation, reduce immune function, increase inflammation, and interfere with sleep quality. Over time, chronic rejection sensitivity can lead to depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and accelerated aging. But the psychological effects are even more damaging. Chronic stress reduces activity in your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and rational decision-making. This makes you less capable of handling rejection effectively, creating a vicious cycle of increasing sensitivity. The social reward system. Dr. Mauricio Delgado's research shows that social acceptance activates the same reward pathways in your brain as food, sex, and addictive drugs. The neurotransmitter dopamine floods your system when you feel accepted, creating powerful motivation to seek more social approval. This reward system explains why social media can be so addictive. Each like, comment, or share triggers a small dopamine release. But it also explains why rejection is so painful. You're not just losing social connection, you're being deprived of a neurochemical reward that your brain craves. The problem is that when you become dependent on external validation for dopamine release, you lose the ability to generate self-worth internally. You become like an addict who needs increasingly frequent hits of approval to feel okay about yourself. The mirror neuron network. Dr. Marco Iacoboni's research on mirror neurons shows that your brain automatically simulates the mental states of others through specialized neural circuits. When you interact with someone, your mirror neurons fire as if you're experiencing what they're experiencing. This mirroring system helps you understand others' emotions and intentions, but it also makes you vulnerable to their judgments. When someone rejects you, your mirror neurons simulate their negative evaluation of you, making you feel bad about yourself from their perspective. People with high rejection sensitivity have overactive mirror neuron systems. They're constantly simulating others' potential negative judgments, creating anxiety and self-doubt, even when no actual rejection has occurred. The default mode network. Dr. Marcus Rachel's research on the default mode network shows that when your brain isn't focused on specific tasks, it defaults to self-referential thinking, often ruminating about social relationships and your place in various hierarchies. For rejection-sensitive people, this default mode becomes dominated by what Dr. Susan Nolan Hoeksema calls rejection rumination, repetitive thoughts about past rejections, potential future rejections, and what others might be thinking about you. This rumination strengthens neural pathways associated with rejection sensitivity, making you more likely to interpret ambiguous social situations as threatening. Your brain literally practices being rejected, making rejection feel more likely and more painful. The neuroplasticity solution. The good news is that Dr. Michael Merzenich research on neuroplasticity shows that your brain can be rewired throughout your life. The same neural pathways that learn to fear rejection can learn new, healthier responses through deliberate practice and new experiences. Dr. Richard Davidson's research on meditation shows that mindfulness practices can reduce amygdala reactivity and increase prefrontal cortex activity, making you less reactive to rejection and more capable of rational responses. Dr. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset shows that viewing rejection as information rather than judgment can literally change your brain's response to social feedback. When you see rejection as data about fit rather than evidence of your worth, your brain processes it differently. The rewiring protocol. To rewire your brain's rejection response, you need to understand that change happens through what Dr. Donald Hebb called neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you respond to potential rejection with curiosity rather than fear, you strengthen neural pathways that support resilience. The key is to practice new responses in low-stakes situations first, gradually building your tolerance for rejection in increasingly challenging contexts. This is exactly what we'll do in the protocol section. Now, I'm going to give you a scientifically proven protocol that will rewire your brain's rejection response and make you genuinely immune to rejection within the next few weeks. This protocol is based on exposure therapy, cognitive restructuring, and neuroplasticity research from the world's leading institutions. Phase 1. Rejection reframing, days 1 to 7. The first step is to fundamentally change how you think about rejection. Dr. Albert Ellis's research on rational emotive behavior therapy shows that it's not rejection itself that causes suffering. It's your interpretation of what rejection means. Start by identifying your rejection beliefs. Complete these sentences honestly. If someone rejects me, it means, when I'm rejected, I am. Rejection proves that I'm. Most people discover they have catastrophic beliefs like, I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, or I'm a failure. Now challenge these beliefs with evidence. Has every rejection in your life actually meant you were worthless? Have you ever rejected someone for reasons that had nothing to do with their worth as a person? Can you think of successful, lovable people who have been rejected? Replace catastrophic interpretations with realistic ones. Rejection means we're not a good fit. Rejection is information, not judgment. Rejection is redirection toward better opportunities. Rejection is proof that I'm taking risks and putting myself out there. Practice the rejection reframe technique. Every time you experience or anticipate rejection, immediately ask yourself, what else could this mean? Generate at least 3 alternative explanations that don't involve your fundamental worth as a person. Phase 2. Systematic desensitization, days 8 to 14. Dr. Joseph Wolpe's research on systematic desensitization shows that you can reduce fear responses by gradually exposing yourself to increasingly challenging versions of what you fear while maintaining a relaxed state. Create a rejection hierarchy, a list of rejection scenarios ranked from least to most anxiety-provoking. Start with very low-stakes situations like asking for a discount at a coffee shop or requesting a small favor from a stranger. Practice relaxation techniques before each exposure. Dr. Edmund Jacobson's progressive muscle relaxation or Dr. Herbert Benson's relaxation response can help you maintain calm during rejection experiences. Start with the easiest item on your hierarchy and deliberately seek that type of rejection. The goal isn't to avoid rejection, it's to experience rejection while remaining psychologically stable. Each successful exposure builds your confidence and reduces your fear. Move up your hierarchy gradually, only advancing to the next level when you can handle the current level without significant anxiety. This might take days or weeks. The pace doesn't matter as much as the consistency. Phase 3. Rejection collection, days 15 to 21. This phase involves what Dr. Jia Jiang calls rejection therapy, deliberately seeking rejection to desensitize yourself to it and discover that rejection is rarely as bad as you imagine. Set a goal to collect a specific number of rejections each week. Start small. maybe 3 to 5 rejections in the first week. The key is to make rejection your goal rather than something you're trying to avoid. Keep a rejection journal documenting each experience. What did you ask for? How were you rejected? How did you feel before, during, and after? What did you learn? You'll quickly discover that most rejections are polite, brief, and have no lasting consequences. Celebrate your rejections as much as your acceptances. Each no is evidence that you're being brave, taking risks, and building resilience. You're literally training your brain to see rejection as an achievement rather than a failure. Notice that rejection rarely involves the catastrophic consequences you imagined. People don't usually insult you, attack you, or remember your request for very long. Most rejection is simply no, thank you, followed by everyone moving on with their lives. Phase 4. Identity Reconstruction. Days 22 to 28. The final phase involves building what Dr. Kristin Neff calls unconditional self-worth, a sense of value that doesn't depend on others' approval or acceptance. Identify your core values, the principles and qualities that define who you are, regardless of others' opinions. Dr. Stephen Hayes' research shows that people with clear values are more resilient to rejection because their self-worth comes from internal rather than external sources. Practice values-based decision-making. When facing potential rejection, ask yourself, what would I do if I were living according to my values rather than my fears? Then do that, regardless of the potential for rejection. Develop what Dr. Brené Brown calls shame resilience, the ability to recognize shame triggers, practice vulnerability, and reach out for support when needed. Shame is what makes rejection feel like evidence of your unworthiness. Create a rejection resume, a document listing all the rejections you've experienced and what positive outcomes resulted from them. You'll discover that many of your best opportunities came after rejections that redirected you toward better paths. Phase 5. Advanced Immunity Building. Ongoing. Once you've completed the initial protocol, continue building rejection immunity through advanced practices. Practice rejection Aikido, using rejection as energy for forward movement rather than resistance. When someone says no to one request, immediately ask for something else or use their feedback to improve your approach. Develop what Dr. Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset about rejection. See each rejection as information about how to improve rather than evidence of fixed limitations. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Rather than, what's wrong with me? Build what Dr. Albert Bandura calls self-efficacy, confidence in your ability to handle whatever outcomes arise. The more rejections you survive and learn from, the more confident you become in your ability to handle future rejections. The neuroplasticity accelerators. To speed up the rewiring process, incorporate these neuroplasticity accelerators. Physical exercise increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which promotes the growth of new neural connections. Dr. John Ratey's research shows that exercise is one of the most powerful tools for changing your brain. Meditation increases gray matter in areas associated with emotional regulation and decreases activity in the amygdala. Dr. Sarah Lazar's research shows that just 8 weeks of meditation can create measurable brain changes. Quality sleep is essential for memory consolidation and neural rewiring. Dr. Matthew Walker's research shows that sleep deprivation impairs your ability to form new neural pathways and maintain emotional regulation, the integration practice. End each day by reviewing your rejection experiences and extracting lessons. Ask yourself, what did I learn about myself today? How did I grow? What would I do differently next time? This reflection helps consolidate the neural changes you're creating. Remember, the goal isn't to never feel hurt by rejection. It's to not be controlled by the fear of rejection. You're building resilience, not numbness. Let me paint a picture of what your life looks like when you've achieved genuine immunity to rejection and freed yourself from the prison of others' approval. You wake up each morning with a sense of authentic purpose rather than anxiety about how others will perceive you. Your decisions are based on your values, goals, and genuine desires rather than on what you think will gain approval or avoid rejection. When you want something, a job, a relationship, an opportunity, you pursue it directly and confidently. You ask for what you want without the paralyzing fear of hearing no. You understand that rejection is simply information about fit, timing, or circumstances, not a judgment of your worth as a person. Your relationships become deeper and more authentic because you're no longer performing a version of yourself designed to avoid rejection. You express your real thoughts, feelings, and needs, which allows others to connect with the genuine you rather than your carefully constructed facade. You take creative risks that you never would have considered before. You start the business, write the book, create the art, or pursue the dream that you've been postponing because you are afraid of criticism or failure. You understand that the only real failure is not trying. Your confidence becomes unshakable because it's based on your own assessment of your worth rather than others' opinions. You develop what Dr. Nathaniel Branden calls authentic self-esteem, a deep knowing of your value that doesn't fluctuate based on external feedback. You become more attractive to others, paradoxically, because you're no longer desperately seeking their approval. People are drawn to those who are comfortable with themselves and don't need constant validation. Your rejection immunity makes you more magnetic, not less. Most importantly, you discover what Dr. Viktor Frankl called the freedom to choose your response. No matter how others treat you, you maintain the power to decide what their behavior means and how you'll respond. You become truly free. The person you're meant to be, confident, authentic, purposeful, and unafraid, is waiting for you to claim this freedom. You have everything you need to become immune to rejection starting right now. Your rejection-proof life begins the moment you decide that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions. The question is, are you ready to stop living in fear and start living in freedom?